Over this last year, the BBC chose not to renew the contract of Jeremy Clarkson, the longtime popular host of the TV show Top Gear. This came after a series of controversies, the final straw being him punching a member of the production team. I can't say that I feel too sorry for him. If I went to my work tomorrow and punched one of my coworkers, I would be fired too and would also face assault charges. However, I guess when you create a $1 billion brand for your network and guide a show into being one of the most watched shows in the world, people expect you to get a little bit of special treatment in this kind of situation. Anyway, the BBC decided they'd had enough of him. The two other hosts of the show, along with most of the production team, decided to leave with him. So the BBC decided to cast new hosts for the show. Now, Top Gear was always one of those shows which I watched, and I think I speak for most of its viewers, mainly because of the hosts. I started out watching clips on YouTube and found these guys to be incredibly funny and thought they had great chemistry together, and so I graduated into watching full episodes. I can assure you I was never really watching the show for the reviews of expensive sports cars that I could never afford anyway, or the ridiculous car stunts and challenges that were probably as fake as pro wrestling. And while the travel to exotic locations may have been cool, let's face it, there are better travel shows out there. I was tuning in for the hosts. Anyway, the new host will be Chris Evans, who, as an American, I'd never even heard of, although based on the comment feeds I've read, I'd say he's not a particularly popular man in Britain, and the first ever American host of the show, Matt LeBlanc, who you may know better as Joey from Friends, who I always thought was a cheesy character on an overrated show. But then he went on to star in the sitcom Episodes, which is absolutely hilarious, largely because he's so willing to make fun of himself. So I guess he's a cool guy, and he's apparently obsessed with cars. I guess it makes sense to cast him, although, if I were to name American celebrities who are known to be obsessed with cars, there are a couple others I'd choose before him. Seriously, if new Top Gear starred these two guys, I would watch the hell out of that show. Anyway, I kind of felt sorry for these new hosts. They were getting so much hate on the internet just for taking a job which I'm sure you would take if it was offered to you too. I figured they were probably working very hard to try to fill the enormous shoes left behind by the previous hosts. Well, after watching the first episode of New Top Gear, my sympathies ended. I don't know which was worse, the fact that these guys were so obviously just trying to impersonate Jeremy Clarkson and company, or the fact that they were so bad at it. I've never been a big fan of cover bands in general, but if you're going to hire one, at least get one that sort of sounds like the original act. The show started off with Chris Evans doing his best Jeremy Clarkson impression, going, "On tonight's program!" But then the show wasn't even good thereafter. I know Top Gear has always been scripted, but at least the old guys could at least pretend that it wasn't. These new guys, you felt like their lines were being read off a cue card being held up by an intern just beside the camera. High school drama students could have done a better job than they did, and the lines weren't even funny. I know a lot of the writers left with Clarkson, but you'd think the BBC could come up with a few comedy writers that could at least sort of emulate that quirky British style of humor that the show was famous for, or develop their own new Matt LeBlanc, Chris Evans style of humor. But they didn't do either one. I wasn't the only one who was not impressed with new Top Gear. It received very poor reviews, and received the lowest television ratings in Britain for a Top Gear series debut in over a decade. Did Chris Evans respond to this like an adult? Did he maybe point out that it wouldn't be fair to expect him and LeBlanc to have developed their own style and found their chemistry in just one episode? Or did he just stay silent, realizing that there was nothing he could say about the situation which would help the matter? Of course not. He went on a Twitter rant about how the media was biased against him and tried to spin the numbers as if they weren't actually bad and the show was actually a hit. Then the second episode came around, and it was an absolute ratings disaster. Top Gear in Britain competes with Antiques Roadshow for its time slot, and it lost the time slot by 2 million viewers. Nearly twice as many people tuned in to watch old people sell crap from their attic than tuned in to watch new Top Gear. As far as that point I made about how it would be fair to give LeBlanc and Evans more time to develop their style, I don't think that's going to happen. This is one of the highest budget shows on the BBC, anticipation was very high, and these guys have absolutely blown it. These guys will be canned as the host of this show by the end of the first series, most likely. And the BBC will go to Clarkson on their hands and knees, begging him to return. Of course, he's already moved on to bigger and better things. Him, Hammond, and May, and most of the production team have signed a deal to create a new show on Amazon Prime, The Grand Tour, which has a bigger budget than Top Gear ever did. In the battle between Clarkson and the BBC, Clarkson has already won by default, and he's going to be winning in a blowout if the Grand Tour is at all successful, which I suspect it will be. They released a couple of promos for the show, which just consisted of the guys sitting in a room brainstorming ideas for the show's name, and these promos were 10 times funnier than new Top Gear. These guys have not lost a stride as far as their sense of humor and chemistry is concerned.